Dear friends, welcome. Welcome once again to Refill 100. Like always, we have special programs, and today our program is indeed very, very special because we have a very special guest with us, and that is Madame Sophie van der Plas. Sophie knows plenty of things about pedagogy as well as about education. Sophie, welcome to Refill 100.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it is a real pleasure to have Sophie. And Sophie, can you tell us a bit more about yourself? Who is Sophie van der Plas?
So for 15 years, I've been teaching French and history in a high school here in Belgium. And 10 years ago, I had a student in my class who was struggling to cope with his schoolwork. He worked really hard, he put a lot of energy, and he had a lot of motivation, but his result remained below average. And at a parents' meeting, his parents turned to me and asked for help. And I really didn't know how to help the students. I was kind of lost because I didn't know what to do. And so that was really the beginning of everything, because it started there. I felt the need of having more tools, having more knowledge on how to help students in this learning process. So I decided to take several training on mental management, neurolinguistics approach, neuroscience, some visual thinking tools. And I felt like, okay, now I'm ready to help students better. And that's what I'm doing most of my time. And yeah.
Very good. Well, friends, you see how come she has become a specialist in education and helping students with special difficulties, learning difficulties to overcome their challenges. Now, Sophie, in what you have learned as a professional who has worked with the students in the classroom, what is it that you have observed with the students that you have worked in terms of their attitudes and their behavior in terms of learning with more or less efficiency, as well as in terms of the challenges that they face when trying to learn?
I would say, like, one of the first things that I realized that when I was working with them on methodological needs, my students didn't really grasp the concept of studying. Some students told me, like, okay, studying means just reading the paper. Let's just keep in mind that after one reading, we estimate that the students will remember between 5 to 10% of the information in the 24 hours following the reading, if they're interested in the subject. So it might be interesting to talk about that to our students. Some of them just said, like, I think studying means memorizing. I have to repeat the information again and again. Some others thought it was just about understanding. So long story short, I would just say, like, few of the answers really satisfied me, and it became quite obvious that we really need to work on this concept, and we need to clarify this, having a common and explicit definition of this word studying to make sure that we help them being more efficient. Another observation that I made was also that as an educator and as a teacher, it was sometimes quite difficult to precisely identify where is it malfunctioning, actually. And because for me, having an issue in study methods, it's too general. I don't know what that means until I pinpoint exactly where the process is malfunctioning. So I felt like the need of creating a tool to give students more guidance during the learning process, to make them more active and invested in this learning process, and also a tool for teachers to have a observation framework to make sure that they can better identify the needs of the students.
Okay, well, dear friends, now I understand. I have read many books, but I haven't retained them. It is because probably I haven't understood correctly, properly, the concept of studying that now Sophie is helping us to understand. So, okay, you have created, you have tried several tools, and you have created tools. Tell us about the tools that now you are using in order to help students to study and to learn better.
Yeah, so the tool is right there. It's the learning wheel. It's really a methodological tools created to better identify the need of the need of the difficulties from the students, but also to give them a scaffold, to give them more guidance during the learning process. So here is the tool. I use it every day with my students, but also with teachers. So I suggest that we go over this tool to better identify and better understand the concept of it. As you can see on the wheel, there is really two parts. There is really the art of the wheel inside, and then you have the second part. I will start with the art of the wheel, where you can find different concepts as motivation and attention. For me, is really the starting point of the learning process. It has to be taken care of before anything else. If a student is not motivated or is not paying attention in class, then we're just stuck there, because it means that it's really the starting. And if we don't have attention, then we won't understand the subject, that we won't be able to use it, and blah, blah, blah. If we're not motivated, it means that I'm not interested. I'm not in action. I'm not part of the solution. So we're just up there. So
okay, let me interrupt you then here. Friends, then let us get this straight. In order to learn, in order to go to school, the first thing that we need to have is motivation. Motivation is such an important tool that without it, the learning process doesn't take any advantage, any advancement in the learning that we want to achieve. Continue, please.
So it's really important, because as a teacher, we can observe that. We can observe that there's a lack of motivation. It will be interesting to understand the root of the motivation issue, and then try to find a way to go find this motivation back, because we definitely need it during the learning process. Another part is the working environment that embed all of the organizational tools that the student needs to be efficient. It means having a planning, having working routines, having a work plan on a daily basis. So it is really important, because some students, they have very efficient methods, but they're just too late. You know what I mean? I'm sure you have many students like that, who are just not in time, and they're just not ready on time. And even though they have great learning strategies, it's not working, and they might fail at one point. So we have to take care of that first.
Okay, friends, then that's another step that we need to consider. Remember, routines are important. Parents, if you have children and they are preparing themselves, well, let's make sure that they have a routine, but then they also have a good place where they can study, and of course that they have a strategy. Otherwise, again, the learning process will not be as advantageous as we would like it to be.
Yeah. Then I put also learning profiles. You might be familiar with those tests designed to identify the students' preferred styles, whether it is visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Just a short word on that, because there's no scientific validity to those tests. That's important to mention, because neuroscience has identified that as a neuromyth. But why those tests are interesting, in my point of view, is that it's quite interesting for students to know themselves, to have self-knowledge of who they are as a learner. So I like those tests, not for the result that we get from it, easy, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. It's not that what's really important, but what I like, it's to force students to pause at one point and to have this helicopter view and look at themselves as a learner, and really pinpoint what's working and what is not working when I'm studying, and make them conscious of what happened during the learning process. It's really the first step of being more autonomous. So I thought those tests are interesting, not for the result, but more for this idea of making them realizing what's going on, what can help me when I'm learning something.
Okay, well, those are important elements that we need to take into account, both in the classroom as well as outside the classroom. Okay, let's continue with the next part then.
So we have the second part, which really identified the 5 different steps we have to go through during the learning process. And we really start with reading as a starting point of the comprehension phase. I will spend a bit of time there on comprehension because this is the most crucial phase in the learning process. It's really no shortcuts are taken when it comes to comprehension. It is really the cornerstone upon which the rest of the learning relies. So, and from my experience, I realized that many students actually think they understand, but they haven't spent much time there. They just think they understand. So it's really interesting to develop some understanding strategies, to identify them and to start using it. The research has identified many strategies that can help students to really work this step that is so important.
And in order to understand, do they need to know the concepts? Do they need to know the words that they are reading and that they are studying at that moment?
Yeah, they do. They really do. They need to be conscious of what they're doing with the content. They have to seeking meaning, to exploring the structure of the content, to be able to establish link between all the information. It's cognitively, it's very intense there. It's where I'm gonna spend a lot of time. It's really there. It's so important because if I have understood a content, then I will memorize it very quickly because it's already there. We already start memorization, and that will lead me to the reflection part. I will be able to use those knowledge in different situations because I understand the concept. And for me, it's really important to insist on that. If this is missing, this is not there, the rest is going to be difficult. So no shortcut there, really. I see that too many often with my students. They take shortcut on this part and then they get stuck in memorization, or they're not able to transfer their knowledge in a new situation. So it is really, really important.
Okay, well, then probably we need to pause for a while and say, friends, dictionaries then probably play an important role. Defining words, defining concepts, and then understanding them seems to be vital in order to comprehend and then initiate the process of memorization. This is what Madame Van den Plas is telling us. So I would advise you get a good dictionary, a good encyclopedia where you could see good definitions validated by specialists in the field. And then from there, once you have understood, move on to the next part that she has indicated, which is memorization, and which will then be easier than if you have not understood.
One thing important, if memorization is built on a strong and a solid comprehension, the memorization will be the quickest part of the learning process. I won't spend hours on memorization because I actually already started when I was doing using all those strategy there on the comprehension phase. So it is important. We will definitely need to identify some efficient strategies, and we will need to reactivate the memory to make sure that we put all the information in the long-term memory. But this is really the easy part, which is funny because a lot of students are considering that this is the difficult part. This is so hard. But most of the time, the reason why it takes so much time and it's so hard, it's just because they haven't spent enough time over there on the comprehension phase.
Okay, very good. Excellent.
So then that leads us to the almost the last step, which is reflection. Reflection is, first of all, you need to have comprehension and memorization to reflect on something. If you don't have any concept or concepts are not clear in your mind, you won't be able to reflect it to make it original link to go a little bit further, on the subject. It's not possible if one of those steps is not really good, not really well worked. So it is really important. What I will suggest is always to train this reflection, to be able to transfer knowledge, to practice, to ask, to anticipate the evaluation situation. Think about what kind of question the teachers can ask me. So I can project myself in the future and try to link all the information together. We'll also force the students to go back to the learning objective of the teachers, which is something they're not doing
Okay.
for some of them.
Well, that's quite interesting. So now you have a perspective on the relevance of this wheel, which Madame van den Plas has developed herself based on the observations and the experience that she has had with the students that she has been dealing with in the classroom. I will ask Sophie, what then are the tools, what will be the recommendations that you have for students as well as for teachers who are in the classroom?
I will have a word on the last step and connected to your question. The last step when you're studying is really checking, make sure that actually be able to answer to this question. Am I ready? Am I ready for a test? Am I ready for this presentation? And I have to base my response to the expectation, teacher expectations. And I have to check my knowledge. And it's funny because many students forget about that. They just like, I've been working for 2 hours already, so I'm good. Like, it's not about the time, it's about where am I after 2 hours? What am I able to do and not able to do? So I have to check and test myself. There's this one tool that I really like, that I like to present. It's those, I use that with my students, is the green card and the red card. Right. It's a very great tool because it's a quick feedback that I can get from the whole class. I will give a statement to my students regarding what we just learned. And if they agree with my statement, they can raise the green card. If they don't agree, they can raise the red card. If they're unsure, they can raise both cards. It is interesting as a teacher because I get feedback from everyone and very quickly, which is great because most of the time, if I'm asking question in front of a classroom, some students will raise their hand, but not all of them. Some are very shy, so I never hear from them and I never get real feedback. So this is a very quick way of having feedback from everyone. It's great to see that some students are raising both cards. I know that they're unsure. We will find out why, but it's already a really great feedback. Then I will start asking questions to the green team and the red team. They have to argue. They have to explain why did they raise this card and not the others. And it really helped not to stigmatize some students because I know that some of them are very stressed by the idea of being questioned in front of the whole class, not having the right answers. I'm not pinpoint anyone in the class. I'm talking about the green team and the red team. So everyone can express themselves and we just argue. Quickly, the students realize that I don't really care about the right answers because what I want is just feedback. And I like the idea that they can express themselves, so I better understand where it's actually malfunctioning, when there's a problem, and then we start talking again about that. It's not the end of the learning process. It's a moment of learning deep, really. So we just test ourselves. I used to do that in class, and what I like is at one point when they know the system, I ask some students to prepare some statement for the next class. So they make their peers work with the card. And that's great because like this, everyone is working in the classroom. And I think I'm done with my job there.
Oh, that's great. Well, it indeed sounds like a very dynamic, very participative, and indeed like the learning process would be advancing in those students. Well, are there other ideas that we might want to learn from you that in the meantime you...
I could talk about hours about this subject because I feel that it's fascinating and it's so important if we want to help students to make them part of the solution. And I think being aware of what kind of strategy I can use, how do I function, who am I as a learner? I think this is so important if we want to make them autonomous learner. So we've been over all the topics on the wheel. Of course, we can zoom on some others. There's many things to say about motivation because this is a very complex topic in learning.
Yeah.
But I think we won't talk about all of this today.
Hmm.
But I'll be happy to
Have
go
a second
further
interview.
on any other subject or another
Okay, well,
interview.
but then if we are going to have a second interview, perhaps, or a second part of this conversation, how can we contact Sophie van der Plas?
So as you see on the wheel, Evocation is the name of the structure where I train teachers, I work with parents, but I also work with students from primary school and secondary school, middle school and high school. And so we have a website, it's www.evocation.be. And we also have an email address where you can ask for information, whether it's about the training or working with the students. So it's methode.evocation@gmail.com.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, friends, dear friends, we are coming to the end of this short presentation interview that we have with Madame Sophie van den Plas. And you have heard, should you have learning difficulties, learning challenges, should you know somebody who is having those issues, then they can certainly go to Evocation. That's the place where Madame van den Plas works, and she will be happy to help students, parents, and teachers as well, should you be in need of that. Sophie, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Likewise, and I hope that we can come across once again on the way, and then we can have another conversation. Thank you so much.
Of course, with pleasure. Thank you.
Friends, thank you so much. See you next time in another conversation in Refill 100. See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.